She lived a quiet life in a small town where everyone knew each other's routines. Every morning she walked along the same streets, greeted the same faces, and returned to the same small apartment where the walls were plain, but warm with memories of little things she cherished. Her life was ordinary in the eyes of anyone watching, but for her, there was a rhythm that made her feel safe and secure. She worked at a local bakery, where the smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries filled her senses every day. It was not a glamorous job, but it gave her a sense of purpose. People came and went, smiled, and thanked her for the warmth in the morning. Yet she remained unnoticed in the grand scheme of the town's life. Despite the simplicity, she had dreams she rarely shared. Dreams that were small and private, moments she hoped to create quietly. She often thought about doing something meaningful, something that would leave a mark, but the world around her seemed too busy, too loud, impatient to notice a small act of kindness. Life had taught her patience, and it had also taught her that not all good intentions reach far. Still, she carried a gentle hope inside, a hope that even a simple act could matter if done with sincerity. Her mornings began before the sun fully rose. She would walk to the bakery, greeting neighbors with a soft smile and a nod. Her routine was steady. Clean the counters, prepare the dough, check the ovens, and arrange the pastries. She loved the smell of baking bread. It reminded her of childhood mornings when her own family would gather around the table, sharing laughter and stories. Those memories were precious. They fueled her desire to create small joys in the world around her. Life outside the bakery was equally ordinary. She would sometimes sit on a park bench during her breaks, watching children play, listening to the distant chatter of friends, and feeling the pulse of the town. Nothing seemed extraordinary. People rushed past with their own lives, carrying worries, errands, and plans that never included the quiet observer on the bench. She often wondered if her actions could ever make a difference, if anyone would ever notice her care if she tried to spread a little kindness. These thoughts lingered in her mind but never grew loud enough to scare her from living her daily life. Her apartment reflected her personality, neat, simple, and filled with small tokens of meaning. A photograph of her grandparents smiling at a summer picnic sat on the table. A worn-out journal lay on the shelf, filled with observations, thoughts, and dreams she did not dare to share with anyone. Each corner of the apartment was deliberate, a quiet expression of her inner world. She took comfort in these objects, knowing that even in the humdrum of daily life, there were moments worth cherishing. One afternoon, as she walked home from the bakery carrying a small loaf for her own dinner, she noticed a man struggling to carry groceries up the stairs to his apartment. Most people walked past, pretending not to see, absorbed in their own routines. She hesitated for a moment, considering whether she should intervene. Then she took a deep breath and offered to help. The man looked surprised but grateful as she lifted the heavier bags and carried them inside. The smile he gave her stayed in her mind long after she returned to her apartment. It was a small gesture, almost invisible in the vastness of life, but it brought her a quiet satisfaction she could not explain. That moment reminded her that simple acts, even when unnoticed, could create a ripple of warmth. Days passed, and she began noticing small opportunities to help. Gestures that required nothing more than attention and care. A neighbor struggling with a broken umbrella in the rain, a stray cat shivering on the sidewalk, a child dropped his toy and looked lost in the crowd. She found herself acting without thought, driven by a gentle instinct to ease the burdens she saw, however small. Each time, she felt a little more alive, a little more connected to the world around her. No one called her a hero. No one told stories about her deeds, and that was perfectly fine. Her acts were personal, quiet, and heartfelt. Still, there was a part of her that longed for more. She dreamed of doing something that mattered not just to her, but to others in ways she could not yet see. She did not crave recognition, only the certainty that kindness could travel beyond her small world. She would imagine scenarios in her mind, a small gesture sparking happiness, a smile changing a day, a moment creating hope. These imaginings were fleeting, but they planted a seed of possibility she could not ignore. One evening, she sat by her window, looking at the town below as the lights flickered on. Children ran across the park, couples walked hand in hand, and the ordinary world moved on without pause. She held a cup of tea, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, and wondered if she had the courage to step beyond routine. She thought about the man she helped weeks ago, about the faces of those she quietly assisted, and felt a quiet determination growing inside. Perhaps it was time to plan something small, something intentional, something that could reach farther than her daily routines allowed. The idea came to her softly, like a whisper. It was not grand, not flashy, not something that would immediately capture attention. It was simple, manageable, and yet meaningful. She began sketching the plan in her mind, considering the small steps she would take, the timing, the place, and the people who might be touched by it. Each thought brought a mix of excitement and fear. Could a simple act really matter? Would anyone even notice? She pushed the doubts aside, focusing instead on the quiet joy she felt imagining the impact. However, small dot in the following days, she prepared quietly. She gathered materials, practiced gestures, and rehearsed words she might say. She did not announce her plans to anyone, not because she wanted to hide, but because the act was personal. It was hers to nurture and shape in silence. People continued with their lives, unaware of the small movement she was cultivating. She walked the streets, observed the world around her, and refined her intentions. Every detail mattered to her, from timing to tone, from place to action. She understood that even small things could create lasting impressions if done thoughtfully at work. She continued her routine but carried a secret energy with her. There was a light in her eyes that had not been there before, a quiet confidence born of anticipation. Customers noticed a difference, though they could not describe it. There was a warmth in her smile, a kindness in her movements that went beyond the ordinary. She felt alive in a way that went beyond daily routines, as though each small act she imagined was already touching the world in some imperceptible way. She also reflected on her own life more deeply. She considered the struggles she had faced, the moments of doubt, the loneliness that occasionally crept in. She realized that her desire to act came not from vanity or ambition, but from a genuine wish to make life a little better for someone else. That realization made her plan even more precious. It was an act born of empathy, of understanding the small pains and joys of life, of wanting to bridge gaps that often went unnoticed. She knew that even if the world never recognized her effort, the act itself would carry meaning. Her mind wandered to the possibilities. She imagined a stranger smiling because of her, a family feeling a moment of relief, a child discovering hope. The scenarios were endless, and each filled her with purpose. For the first time in a long while, she felt that her actions mattered, not for fame or recognition, but because they created ripples, however small, in the lives of others. That thought was more powerful than any applause, more enduring than any praise. The night before she planned to act, she hardly slept. She reviewed every detail, rehearsed every step, and imagined every possible outcome. Excitement and nerves danced together in her chest, a mixture she had never experienced with such intensity. She understood that the moment ahead was not about her, but about the people she hoped to touch. That understanding grounded her, calmed her fears, and strengthened her resolve. She realized that the act she had planned was bigger than herself, even though it began in simplicity. As the sun rose, she awoke with a sense of quiet determination. Today, the ordinary rhythm of life would shift, if only slightly, because of her. She prepared herself, dressed simply, and stepped into the morning with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years nurturing a quiet purpose. Every step felt meaningful, every breath purposeful. She was ready to take the first step in an act that began as simple, small and private, yet had the potential to reach far beyond what she could imagine. Her journey of a simple act had begun. It was ordinary in appearance, personal in intent, and powerful in its quiet promise. The town continued its routine around her, unaware that something small and extraordinary was about to unfold. She carried hope in her heart, empathy in her actions, and courage in her steps. Ready to turn a quiet plan into a story that would be remembered far longer than she could ever foresee, she woke up early the next day with a feeling she could not shake. It was different from her usual mornings, different from the quiet comfort of routine. Today was the day she would act on the small plan she had been nurturing. Her heart beat with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the town slowly come to life. She noticed people rushing past, some talking to themselves, some laughing with companions, and some walking in silence. She wondered which of them might notice her act, if at all, and she realized that it did not matter. What mattered was that she had decided to step forward. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were simple, comfortable, and allowed her to move freely. Everything she did that morning was intentional. She wanted her act to be natural, heartfelt, and unassuming. She checked her bag to make sure she had everything she might need. Even small details mattered to her: the timing, the location, the items she brought along. She had thought of everything, yet she knew that some things could not be predicted. That was part of the beauty of it. Life was unpredictable, and the small acts she planned had the chance to touch it in ways she could not foresee. Walking through the town, she felt a strange energy around her. Every sound, every face, every movement seemed sharper, more noticeable. She passed the bakery, where she usually worked, and noticed the familiar smells and sounds she loved so much. She thought briefly about the ordinary life she was leaving behind for a moment, and then smiled. This was a small departure, but it was meaningful. She understood that moments like this, where ordinary people make choices to act with care, could create unexpected ripples. When she arrived at the first place she intended to begin her act, she paused. The street was quiet, only a few people walking, a dog barking in the distance, and the soft hum of the wind in the trees. She looked around carefully, thinking about the people she might touch with her actions. Her act was simple, but she hoped it would have significance. She adjusted the items in her hands and took a deep breath. This was the moment she had prepared for. It's the moment when a quiet plan would become a living reality. As she began, a strange sense of calm settled over her. Each small movement felt deliberate, each gesture meaningful. She helped a person struggling with a heavy bag, and another who had dropped something without realizing. With every simple act, she noticed small smiles, brief expressions of relief, or grateful nods. No one knew her name, no one announced her presence, and yet she felt a growing sense of connection. It was as if she could feel the invisible threads that tied people together, and her actions were strengthening them. The day unfolded slowly, but powerfully. She moved from one place to another, quietly performing the acts she had planned. She held doors open, offered a comforting word to someone looking upset, and helped an elderly person cross a busy street. Each gesture was small, almost imperceptible, but the impact was real. She did not stop to think about recognition or reward. She moved purely out of a desire to make life a little easier for others. She noticed a subtle change in the way people reacted to her presence. Some smiled more, some paused to thank her, and some simply felt lighter as she passed by. That was enough. At lunchtime, she took a moment to rest in the park. She watched families, friends, and strangers interacting. She reflected on her actions so far and felt a quiet pride, not in herself, but in the simple power of kindness. She understood that the world often moved too quickly for small gestures to be noticed. But that did not reduce their importance. A smile, a helping hand, or a kind word could change a day, a moment, a life. She realized that her act, while small, was part of a larger story of connection and compassion. As the afternoon progressed, she encountered moments she had not planned for. A lost child, a person in distress, an unexpected need for help. Each situation demanded quick thinking and presence of mind. She responded instinctively, guided by empathy and a genuine desire to help. These unplanned moments tested her resolve but also reinforced the importance of her actions. She realized that being ready to act, even when unprepared, was part of the true power of kindness. Her small plan had opened the door for spontaneous acts of compassion that she could not have anticipated. People began to notice her in small ways. A shopkeeper smiled warmly, a passerby nodded in appreciation, and a neighbor stopped to exchange a few words. None of these acknowledgments were extraordinary, but they were signs that her actions were being seen, even in the quietest of ways. She did not seek attention, but the recognition, however small, brought her a sense of fulfillment. She felt part of the community in a deeper way, connected not just by proximity, but by shared human experiences. She also noticed the emotional impact of her actions. A person who had appeared frustrated found a moment of relief when she helped them. A stranger who seemed lonely smiled when she offered a kind word. A child who had been scared found comfort in her calm presence. She realized that her simple acts were creating ripples and emotions, touching lives in ways that went beyond words. The feeling was profound and humbling. It reminded her that small gestures, when done with care, could have far-reaching effects. By late afternoon, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The simple acts she had planned and the spontaneous ones that arose throughout. The day had created a tapestry of human connection. She walked home slowly, reflecting on the day. She thought about the lives she had touched, the small smiles she had inspired, and the invisible threads of kindness she had strengthened. It was not a day of grand achievements, but it was a day that mattered. She felt that she had planted seeds of compassion that might grow in ways she could not yet see, back in her apartment. She wrote in her journal, capturing the moments that had stood out. She reflected on her feelings, the reactions of others, and the unexpected challenges she had faced. Writing allowed her to process the day and to understand the deeper significance of her actions. She realized that her act, while simple, had the power to inspire. Not through fame or recognition, but through the quiet strength of intention and care. She felt a sense of completion, a sense that her purpose had been fulfilled in a meaningful way. That evening, she prepared a small meal and sat by the window, watching the town as it transitioned into night. The lights glowed softly, and the streets became quieter. She thought about the people she had helped, the smiles she had seen, and the moments of relief she had witnessed. The day had been ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in impact. She understood that the smallest acts could have the largest effects when performed with sincerity and attention. The world might not notice, but that did not diminish the value of kindness. As she prepared for sleep, she felt a sense of anticipation for the days to come. She knew that her actions could inspire further acts of compassion, that her small plan could grow beyond her initial intentions. She understood that the power of kindness was not in recognition or reward, but in its ability to touch lives, even in the quietest ways. She closed her eyes with a heart full of hope, knowing that her simple act was only the beginning of something much larger. The ordinary had become extraordinary through intention, courage, and the quiet strength of human connection. The day had shown her that planning was important, but action was essential. Without stepping forward, even the smallest plans remained dreams. She had taken a step, and it had mattered. The ripples of her deeds were already beginning to spread, and she felt a quiet excitement for what might unfold next. She understood that true impact was often invisible at first, seen only in subtle changes, in smiles, in moments of relief, and in the quiet gratitude of those who experienced it. As the night deepened, she reflected on the lessons of the day. She realized that courage is not always loud, and kindness does not always need an audience. The simple acts she had planned had become more than she imagined, touching lives in ways that were intangible yet powerful. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the act, small as it was, carried meaning. She understood that each person had the potential to create ripples of compassion, and that sometimes the quietest individuals make the most significant impact. She drifted into sleep with thoughts of the next day. She knew that her journey was not over, that there were more moments to act, more lives to touch, and more opportunities to extend kindness. The simple plan had revealed a larger purpose, a way of living that connected her to the world around her. It was no longer just an idea. It was a practice, a way of being, a living example of how even the smallest gestures can create meaningful change. Tomorrow, she thought, would bring new moments, new opportunities, and new challenges. She felt ready, strengthened by the experiences of the day. The ordinary had become extraordinary. The quiet had become significant. And the small plan had transformed into a living, breathing journey. She understood that her acts of kindness, no matter how simple, had the power to inspire, comfort, and connect. And in that realization, she found a profound sense of purpose and peace. The next morning, She woke up with a mixture of anticipation and calm. Something felt different. Yesterday had been filled with small successes, quiet gestures, and moments of connection that had surprised her with their significance. Today, she felt as if the world held possibilities she could not yet see. She dressed simply, carrying herself with the quiet confidence that came from the small victories of the previous day. She knew she would act again, and this time, she felt ready for anything that might unfold. She walked through the streets of her town, noticing familiar faces and places with fresh eyes. The bakery smell wafted through the air, and children's laughter echoed in the parks. Everything seemed ordinary. Yet she felt a sense of extraordinary potential in each little detail. Her act from the previous day had created a sense of quiet excitement within her. She realized that even ordinary days could carry moments that mattered deeply to someone else. And that knowledge made her movements deliberate and thoughtful. As she moved through the town, she noticed something she had not expected. People beginning to recognize her presence. It was subtle at first, a nod here, a smile there, but it grew more noticeable. Some faces carried expressions of curiosity, others of gratitude, and a few of surprise. She wondered if they remembered her small gestures from the previous day. The thought warmed her heart and made her steps lighter. Her plan was still small, personal, and quiet, but it had begun to touch lives in ways she could not have anticipated. She arrived at the first location, where she intended to perform her simple acts. As she began, she noticed that one of her gestures, helping a person carry heavy groceries, had a ripple effect. Another person, inspired by her kindness, immediately offered assistance to someone else nearby. She did not see it at first, but she felt it in the energy of the space, a sense of lightness that had not been there before. The small act was growing beyond her control, spreading through the ordinary moments of life in subtle ways. Throughout the morning, she encountered unexpected situations. A man had dropped a stack of papers that scattered across the sidewalk. She helped him gather them, and the gratitude in his eyes was profound. A young woman seemed lost and overwhelmed, and she offered a calm word and a gentle direction. Each interaction, simple inaction, carried a weight of meaning she could not have imagined. It became clear to her that her small plan had the power to create an impact far beyond her initial intention. As she continued, the town began to respond in surprising ways. People who had witnessed her gestures began performing their own acts of kindness, inspired by what they had seen. A child who had watched her help someone else picked up litter without being asked. A shopkeeper, moved by her gentle attention, offered an extra loaf of bread to a struggling customer. She realized that her plan, meant to be simple and personal, had started a quiet chain reaction that connected the town in unexpected ways. It was more than she could have imagined, and yet it felt natural, effortless, and beautiful. By mid-morning, she noticed a crowd gathering without any intention of drawing attention. People stopped to watch her perform small acts, not out of expectation, but curiosity. They observed the gentle way she moved, the care she gave to each moment, and the quiet impact of her gestures. Some were inspired to act, while others simply appreciated the presence of someone who reminded them of the power of kindness. She did not seek the attention, and yet it became inevitable. Her simple plan had begun to ripple outward, touching the lives of strangers in profound ways. A turning point came when she helped a young boy, whose bicycle chain had slipped. She knelt to adjust the chain, speaking softly and offering reassurance. The boy's mother, watching nearby, was moved by the care and patience she demonstrated. She had not intended to inspire anyone, yet her presence and actions had created a moment of connection and trust that resonated deeply. The mother later shared the story with friends and neighbors, describing the woman's gentle attention and thoughtfulness. Her simple act, unnoticed by her in its broader effect, had already begun to enter the lives of others in unexpected ways. As the day progressed, the impact of her actions became more evident. People she had never met approached her to express gratitude, recounting moments where her gestures had touched them personally. A stranger shared that a kind word she offered had given them courage to face a difficult decision. Another person described how seeing her help someone else had inspired them to reach out and assist a neighbor. The realization hit her gently but firmly. her small act had grown far beyond her original plan, transforming ordinary moments into meaningful experiences for many. Amid this unfolding impact, she faced moments of doubt. She questioned whether she could sustain the energy, whether the gestures were enough, and whether she truly understood the breadth of influence her actions had created. Yet each time she hesitated, she observed a small sign, a smile, a nod, a word of thanks that reminded her of the quiet power she held. Her courage, once private and internal, became a guiding force, encouraging her to continue with patience and humility. By afternoon, the town itself seemed to shift. Conversations carried warmth, strangers interacted with unexpected friendliness, and the energy of the streets felt lighter. It was as if a quiet transformation had taken place, catalyzed by the simple acts she had planned and performed. She walked through familiar areas, noticing the subtle differences. A bench left clean for someone else, a small gift given without expectation, a wave of acknowledgement exchanged between neighbors. These ripples, born from her initial plan, extended far beyond her immediate reach. She also encountered moments that tested her resilience and commitment. A disagreement erupted between two people nearby, and she intervened gently, offering calm words that diffused tension. A person in distress approached her, seeking help for a problem she had not anticipated. Each unexpected challenge required presence of mind, empathy, and courage. She realized that the true power of her act was not only in its simplicity, but in her ability to respond to unforeseen moments with grace and care, even as the day unfolded unpredictably. She maintained focus on the intention behind her plan. She remembered why she had begun: to act with care, to create a ripple of kindness, to connect with the lives around her. She understood that the impact was not measured in recognition, fame, or reward, but in the quiet shifts she could witness in the hearts and behaviors of others. Every smile, every gesture, every word of gratitude reinforced the significance of her actions and motivated her to continue. By late afternoon, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary developments. The simple acts she had planned had become something more, something living, breathing, and far-reaching. The town, once ordinary and routine, now held moments of warmth and connection that could be traced back to her presence. She marveled at how a single individual, acting quietly and intentionally, could catalyze a chain reaction of empathy and care. It was both humbling and exhilarating, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility to continue acting with integrity. Her heart was full as she returned home for a brief rest. She sat by the window, watching the town from above, noticing the subtle ways her actions had touched the lives of those she could not directly observe. She realized that the simple gestures she performed had grown into a web of connection, linking people through moments of shared humanity. The magnitude of this realization was overwhelming, yet beautiful. She understood that the ripples of kindness could extend far beyond the initial act, reaching lives in ways she could never predict or control. Evening brought new challenges and opportunities. A community event had drawn people to a local square, and she noticed the lingering effects of her morning actions. People were more patient, more helpful, and more willing to engage with strangers. She participated quietly, performing small acts as opportunities arose, and felt the collective energy shift in response. Her presence, though still unassuming, carried an invisible influence that created moments of harmony and understanding. She marveled at how small intentions executed thoughtfully could create waves of positive change. Throughout the evening, she reflected on the unpredictability of her journey. She had begun with a simple plan, expecting modest outcomes, and yet the day had unfolded in ways she could not have anticipated. The power of her actions lay not in their visibility, but in their authenticity, their consistency, and their capacity to inspire others. She understood that influence was often subtle, hidden in moments of empathy and care that ripple outward silently, touching lives in ways that may never be fully visible. By nightfall, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment and humility. The day had revealed the extraordinary potential of ordinary actions, the quiet strength of intention, and the profound impact of compassion. She knew that the journey was only beginning, that the ripples she had created would continue to spread, and that the legacy of small, thoughtful acts could grow in ways she could not yet see. Her plan, once private and personal, had become a living, breathing force of connection, touching lives and inspiring others to act with kindness. As she prepared for sleep, she reflected on the lessons of the day. Courage, she realized, did not always need to be loud or visible. Acts of kindness did not require recognition to be meaningful. The true measure of impact lay in the quiet transformations occurring within individuals and communities, the subtle shifts in behavior, attitude, and emotion that stemmed from intentional care. Her simple plan had become a catalyst for these transformations. Revealing the extraordinary potential within the ordinary, she drifted into sleep with a heart full of gratitude and anticipation. The unexpected turning point had come, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through quiet, deliberate actions performed with intention and care. She understood that her journey was far from over, that there were more moments to eye. The morning began quietly, but she felt a sense of anticipation unlike any she had experienced before. Yesterday had revealed thither. Simple acts had begun to influence the town in ways she could not have imagined. She rose with purpose, knowing that today would be another opportunity to make a difference. To extend the ripples of kindness she had begun, she dressed simply, with comfortable clothing that allowed her freedom of movement, and prepared herself mentally for whatever the day might hold. She understood that her actions could reach far. Even if she never knew the full extent, walking through the town, she noticed subtle signs of change from the day before. People greeted each other with warmer smiles, held doors open for strangers, and offered assistance without prompting. It was as though her quiet gestures had planted seeds of empathy, and now they were beginning to grow in the hearts of others. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not in recognition, but in witnessing how small acts of care could ripple outward, influencing others to act with similar kindness. Her first stop was the bakery, where she had worked for many years. The familiar smells of fresh bread and pastries filled the air, comforting her and reminding her of why she loved simple routines so much. She moved through her tasks with intention, greeting customers warmly and assisting her coworkers. Today, however, she noticed something different. The energy in the bakery felt lighter, more cooperative, and more attentive. People who had once been absorbed in their own worries were now more present, more considerate, and more willing to engage. She realized that the ripples of kindness she had set in motion were spreading into the spaces she frequented regularly, creating a sense of community that went beyond words. As she left the bakery, she encountered the first unexpected opportunity to extend her acts of kindness. A woman was struggling to carry a stack of packages while keeping an eye on her two small children. Without hesitation, she offered to help, lifting some of the heavier items and guiding the children safely across the street. The woman's relief was immediate and profound. She smiled warmly and thanked her repeatedly, expressing gratitude not just for the assistance, but for the thoughtfulness and care she had shown. In that moment, she felt a deep connection with the stranger, understanding that kindness has the power to create bonds even among people who will never meet again. Throughout the morning, she continued to encounter situations that required her attention. A young man seemed lost, clutching a map and looking anxious. She approached him gently, offering guidance and reassurance. An elderly neighbor needed help with her groceries, and she assisted without hesitation. Each action was small in isolation, but together they created a pattern of care and attention that began to influence the atmosphere of the town. People began to notice, some observing quietly, others stepping in to offer help themselves. It was as though her acts had unlocked a sense of responsibility and empathy in others, encouraging them to participate in the quiet work of kindness. By midday, the impact of her actions had become more visible. A street vendor, inspired by her gentle assistance, offered free refreshments to children playing nearby. A group of teenagers witnessing her help, an elderly man across the road, decided to assist a person who had dropped their wallet. These small, spontaneous acts of generosity were direct consequences of her initial plan, spreading outward like ripples in water. She did not seek recognition, yet she could not help but feel a quiet sense of wonder at how far her influence had reached. As she moved through the town, She encountered a community center where a group of volunteers was preparing for a local event. They seemed stressed and disorganized, unsure of how to manage the preparations. She offered her assistance, helping to organize supplies and coordinate tasks. Her calm presence and thoughtful suggestions had an immediate effect, easing tension and improving efficiency. The volunteers expressed gratitude, noting how her involvement had improved their ability to serve the community. Once again, she saw the tangible effects of her actions, not only on individuals, but on groups of people working together. The afternoon brought more opportunities for connection. She visited a park where children were playing, noticing one child who seemed isolated and shy. She engaged the child gently, encouraging participation and providing support in small ways. Other children, observing her approach, followed her lead and included the shy child in their games. The child's smile was radiant, and the gratitude of the parent was heartfelt. She realized that her simple act had extended to a moment of inclusion, teaching empathy and consideration to young minds. The effects of her kindness were not just immediate. They had the potential to shape attitudes and behaviors in ways that could last a lifetime. In another part of town, she encountered a local cafe where the staff were struggling with a sudden influx of customers. She offered to assist by taking orders, cleaning tables, and providing support wherever needed. The staff, initially hesitant, were soon grateful for the help, and the customers noticed the improved service. Small gestures, such as offering a smile or a kind word to each person, created an atmosphere of warmth and cooperation. Once again, her presence had a ripple effect, influencing the behavior and mood of those around her as the day progressed. She began to notice stories forming around her actions. A neighbor recounted how a small act of kindness had inspired them to reach out to someone in need. A local teacher mentioned how observing her interactions with children had motivated them to encourage compassion in their classroom. A passerby shared that seeing her assist a stranger had restored their faith in human goodness. These stories were not sought or orchestrated by her. They emerged naturally, testament to the power of authenticity and intention in shaping the lives of others. By late afternoon, she paused to rest on a park bench, reflecting on the cumulative effects of her actions. She had begun with a simple plan, intending to perform a few small gestures of kindness. Now, the impact had grown far beyond her imagination, touching countless lives and inspiring a wave of compassion that extended across the town. She realized that the true measure of influence was not in recognition or reward, but in the quiet transformation that occurred in the hearts and minds of others. Each person she had touched had the potential to pass on the kindness, creating a network of empathy and care that could extend indefinitely. During this reflective moment, she encountered an older man who had been observing the day's events quietly. He shared a story of how a small act of kindness from someone long ago had changed the course of his life. He spoke of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of compassion. Listening to his words, she felt a deep sense of connection to the broader human experience. Understanding that her actions were part of a timeless cycle of care and generosity, the realization reinforced her commitment to continue acting with intention, knowing that even small gestures could have profound effects as evening approached. She returned to the town square, where the energy of the day had shifted noticeably. Conversations were warmer, interactions more thoughtful, and the atmosphere imbued with a sense of collective empathy. People she had assisted earlier in the day approached her to share how her actions had influenced their own behavior. A young man explained how he had been inspired to help a neighbor in need, while a mother recounted how her child had learned the value of kindness by observing the small gestures she had performed. The ripples she had set in motion were now visible in the actions of others. Demonstrating the power of influence rooted in authenticity and care, the night brought moments of quiet reflection. She returned to her apartment feeling a profound sense of fulfillment and humility. Her simple plan, once private and personal, had grown into a living, breathing network of empathy that extended far beyond her initial intentions. She understood that influence was not measured by visibility or recognition, but by the subtle shifts in behavior, attitude, emotion that occur when acts of kindness are performed with intention and care. Her journey had revealed the extraordinary potential within ordinary actions, demonstrating that even the smallest gestures could create lasting impact. As she prepared for bed, she wrote in her journal, documenting the events of the day, the stories she had encountered, and the reflections that had arisen from her experiences. Writing allowed her to process the unfolding impact of her actions, providing clarity and insight into the interconnectedness of human behavior. She realized that her acts had not only influenced others, but had also transformed her own perspective, deepening her understanding of empathy, courage, and the quiet power of intention. She drifted into sleep with a heart full of gratitude and anticipation. The ripple effect of her actions had grown beyond her imagination, influencing individuals, groups, and the broader community. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that each day presented new opportunities to extend kindness and create meaningful connections. The simple plan that had begun in quiet reflection had now become a force for change, demonstrating the profound impact of authentic, intentional action. And in that understanding, she found peace, purpose, and a quiet excitement for the days to come. The morning air was cool and quiet, yet it carried a sense of possibility that made her heart feel light. She had spent days performing,